listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm joined with Shayn Jones, a podcaster, researcher, and investigator, born and raised in the Metro Detroit area of Michigan. Shayn launched his solo podcast, Inquiries of Our Reality, back in 2022, diving deep into the unknown and the unexplained. Later that year, he expanded his reach by co-creating a second show, Bizarre Encounters with Shayn and Oren, alongside his co-host, Oren Felix. On top of that, he also hosts a YouTube live show called Bizarre Inquiries. With so many projects in motion, Shayn founded Open Minds Media as an umbrella for all of his creative work and collaborations. Beyond content creation, Shayn is a lifelong experiencer of paranormal phenomena, which has fueled his passion for personal research and investigation. His work explores everything from the paranormal and cryptids to UFOs, aliens, and all things anomalous and mysterious. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a long time since I've been on. I think at least probably like 2.5 years or so since I've been on your show. That was like right when I first started my show originally.
Yeah, I think so, because we did it close together. We did the podcast swap, so getting pretty. We've done a lot since then for sure.
I don't even think I had Bizarre Encounters running originally the first time we talked. And I started that later on the first year after I started my podcast. So that just shows how early on, because Bizarre Encounters, I think, is only like 6 months behind Inquiries. So it was in between that gap of me first starting and Bizarre Encounters starting. So I guess a lot has happened since then. Same with you, considering last time when we talked on my show.
Yes. Yes. It's cool to see another podcaster stick with it, because I see a lot of people start. And then there's so much devotion, there's so much energy that goes into maintaining it. And so it's really cool to see the ones that started around the same time that have been able to, keep nurturing it and keep producing content. So kudos to you for sticking with it all these years.
At a certain point, it's like you have so much time and effort invested into it that you just feel like you're losing a whole portion of hard work and yourself if you quit. And I'm like 328 episodes deep with Inquiries, 120 episodes deep with Bizarre Encounters. Of course, some random side shows along the way. But at this point, I feel like I have like too much invested in it to stop, or it's like I won't even know how to stop at this point. And, being one of those kids that grows up with a weird childhood, parents always telling you like, oh, why do you quit everything? Why do you quit everything? And it's like, they don't understand that you just didn't really find that right thing. So, once you find something that kind of fits and it works, you're kind of like, all right, I'm going to make a promise to myself not to quit this. And it's not necessarily like a passive thing, but, just a matter of like finding that right thing finally. And then you have to force yourself to stick with it, because most things, you have your ups and downs, but what matters in the end is that you don't quit when you have your downs, because, you'll never know if you quit.
Right. Yeah. I found pacing myself and giving myself breaks here or there has helped me maintain it during certain periods. Instead of just saying, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, this is hard. It's just like, okay, well, maybe I need a little break so that I can come in with a fresh perspective. And that's helped me maintain it, I think, all of the years. But I am nowhere near the level that you are, because I release episodes in longer increments than you, or more spread out, because I do bi-weekly, and so I'm getting close to 100, but you surpassed me a long time ago.
I overkill it. I drop 2 episodes a week and then one of my other shows. So it's like, I don't know. I've gotten so used to that pace that I don't know how I would only drop 1 episode. Like it would feel weird, but like at the flip side, maybe I'd have more people listening if I didn't overkill it. But I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of podcasts that drop 2. That's not too much of an overkill.
No. I wish I could maintain that kind of momentum with creation, but I just burn out a little bit, I think, if I'm like starting too many things at once. So, I think we have to find our own pace with it. So those that have considered podcasting, it doesn't have to look like what anybody else is doing. It needs to match the pace that you can actually maintain, that balances with your everyday life. So
I take a week off behind the scenes all the time, though. It's just a matter of nobody notices because you get a little bit of a stockpile going, and then you're just like, all
Right.
right, I'm not going to record or put anything out this week or even go on social media. And it's like, as long as
Right.
the main episodes drop, like nobody even notices. So, like, there's a lot of times I take like a week off behind the scenes. It's just,
Right.
unless you're trying to contact me on social media, you just don't notice. But that's kind of hard, anyways, because I only end up popping on every couple of days because as much as I love running a podcast, I really hate social media
It
and my
gets,
phone as
yeah,
a whole.
it gets draining, just being seen and then always being in that mental space all the time. I feel like you got to retreat just to stay grounded and just detach from some of the noise so that you know what's your thoughts versus the collective thoughts. So I feel like that's just good hygiene for anybody that is trying to balance that mental space with their earthly life. It's just a lot sometimes. So,
I just want to exist in this everyday world while getting to have good conversations, while getting to research stuff. But there's always all the little side things that come along with podcasts and everyday life that
mhm.
you don't just get to do just directly the things that you want to do. And that's one of the hard things
Yeah.
with the podcast is that people don't realize how much there actually is behind the scenes with it. They think it's just hop on, have a show, drop it, and it's a lot more than that. And it's like, you know, people don't realize like how much work actually goes into a podcast. Like it's definitely rewarding. It's definitely worth it. I don't want to
Right,
make
right.
anybody sound like they shouldn't start a podcast they're thinking about it, but just in general, like it's a lot of work. You kind of have to understand the fact that it will become a job, but it's a job that makes you feel fulfilled. So, it's worth it in the end.
Yes. Yes, the amount of networking and everything like that. I think people are like, "Oh, it's so nice she has a podcast." And like they don't necessarily understand the amount of devotion it takes to constantly responding to emails, scheduling things, rescheduling things, making links. Yeah, it is a lot to keep up with. Like I have to have a little checklist or I will totally forget to
Oh yeah, you see all my whiteboards up on my well, you can't see them because they're kind of black, but I got like three
yeah.
whiteboards up on this wall for to do, shows to do, projects to do, my
Yeah.
daily calendar. Like
Yeah, that's the only way that I can hold it all. So,
then sticky notes, of course, all over the monitors and everything of like little side things I need to remember to do that are different than my to-do list because I should just put them there, but once it's up and it's on the wall, it feels like I'm adding another task if I don't just put a sticky
yes.
note off to the side. So
Yes, I have two different lists that one is for like have to do right now and the other is like if there's that extra time to explore that. So I
that's exactly what it is for me. This is like my when I have time, this is like adamantly you need to make sure you do this right now.
right, right. So for those who haven't listened to our last episode or haven't followed your podcast, could you share just a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to start that podcast and maybe just some things you've learned about yourself through hosting it?
Well, I am Shayn from Inquiries of Our Reality. If anybody didn't catch that, well, that's my first original solo show, and just kind of lay down a little bit of a preface, I guess, of each show before I get into it. Inquiries of Our Reality is kind of like a open conversation interview style show. It's not, like the typical interview style. It's more of like a laid back conversation, but we get into some like really, really deep stuff. So I'll have like researchers come on, investigators, honestly, pretty good range of people. I'll talk about UFOs, conspiracies, cryptids, the paranormal, spirituality, psychology, philosophy, like anything that's an open minded topic, we pretty much end up covering on that show. And then my other show, Bizarre Encounters, is more deep dive based, where me and my co-host kind of deep dive in two different formats, and we do have some guests on in the mix here and there, but mainly it's just us two kind of deep diving into some stuff while also kind of sharing some laughs along the way and getting into some side tangents. And then my other show is Bizarre Inquiries, which with that one, it's we'll have like clips, articles, questions, just stuff that fascinates us, or that listeners have submitted, and we'll kind of explore those and kind of throw our ideas on them and just kind of address current events and just different things. It's kind of like a laid back YouTube kind of like live style show talking about news clips and everything like that. So a little mix of everything for everybody between all of the different shows. But what kind of originally inspired me to do it was multiple things. Like this is always like a hard question to answer directly because there's just so many different things that have inevitably led into it. I grew up with my grandma being Cherokee, so I grew up with her telling me all of these different stories of folklore creatures, on top of having bizarre astro travel experiences as a child, and then that inevitably leading into some darker experiences as a teenager. While all of this is going on, of course, you have kind of a weird childhood at home. So you start diving into, like philosophy, psychology, also kind of questioning the narrative because that tends to be something that happens in those types of households. So on top of that, I start diving into like 9/11 conspiracies and just different ways of thinking outside of the box. So you already kind of have this mixture of like paranormal with like different types of thinking, open-minded thinking, philosophical thinking, and then me not necessarily knowing where to place all of this different research and everything I'm doing. So, me just kind of being that guy who's just the plethora of useless knowledge, as I called myself for a while, because I just had a little bit of everything. And then I ended up getting into like urban exploring and stuff with my girlfriend back probably like 12 years ago or so now. And I think I talked about that the first time I was on your show, but that ended up leading into me having somewhat of a creature type encounter. And I didn't quite really know where to like place it in my head, even though I'd had paranormal experiences. I'd heard about all these different cryptid experiences from my grandma and stuff, but it's a little bit different when you see something that's physical, but then later on doesn't seem physical when you capture pictures of it and it has like a translucent view to it. So it just kind of led me down this path of even more researching into, people mixing things up because I've noticed that there's like a lot of cryptids that kind of get separated with folklore, and then there's some that are strictly folklore. So after this messing of all these different things, me listening to podcasts and stuff, I got to a point where I was like, all right, people think a little bit differently than I do, and I kind of wanted to be able to kind of throw my spin on some people's ideas, some people's research, go back and forth on having these deep conversations because. Even listening to shows, I'm like, all right, well, this person talks about this, but this person the guest seemed pretty excited about this thing and they kind of went a different direction. I'm like, I do things a little bit differently. So,
Mm-hmm.
like most people, you kind of take it upon yourself to, take on the next big project. So that inevitably all ended up leading into podcasting. And at least from podcasting, I'm kind of a weird back and forth person where, even back then, I was kind of one of those people where I kind of exist in my own head a lot of the time. I'm not a super duper social type person, but when I go into a podcast, it's kind of like a different atmosphere that even so at work, like I'm very standoffish just because I don't know, I just don't really have the interest in talking to a lot of people all the time. I'm just more of an introvert in that way. But when I go on the podcast, it's kind of made me a little bit more open to conversations. Like I know that at any point I could start up a conversation with anybody about just about anything. The
Mm-hmm.
difference is went from me being kind of socially awkward to now it's just a matter of me choosing not to necessarily do it all the time.
Right.
So it's definitely helped to kind of transition me as a person as far as wanting to get on top of bettering myself in a lot of different ways, learning a lot more with trying to push yourself farther than what you think your limits could possibly be and just trying to exceed to get to the next possible thing, not necessarily in a bad way, but just always this method of just growing and not getting into this stagnant spot. So at least for me, for podcasting, I feel like it's one, gave me an avenue to talk about all of this weird stuff that I don't necessarily know where else to talk about it with because you can't necessarily talk about all this weird stuff in your normal everyday life. On top of also kind of, I guess, making me, not that I was necessarily bad at talking to people, but kind of helped me get my voice in a way because I've always, like we're kind of talking about before we started the show, I've always been kind of a more behind the scenes guy where even with my podcast, like I'm very audio based. I'm not necessarily a fan of video, even though I know I definitely have to push my way into that. But it's kind of as a whole, it's kind of helped me come into myself a bit. And I would never take back any of it for the world, as much hard work as it's been, and as much heartbreak as there's been in the process of it. But with most things, it's a labor of love, and at some point, maybe it'll take care of me. But until then, I'm just enjoying the ride.
Yeah, I think it's okay to just do it for fun, and then if it turns into something bigger, then as long as you're approaching it through being inspired by it and enjoying it, then it will carry itself through. So
I
I
just
think
want
the
to spend my
goals,
days looking into weird shit. That's just
yeah,
all I want to do.
same, same. Yeah, it's helped me find my voice too. I used to be really shy, and I like the thought of ever having something like a podcast or being a public speaker was just impossible. So I don't know what came over me to officially create that outlet. I think it's just I wanted to share all of these ideas that I've been researching, all this work, to compile it and see if anybody else was interested. And I love that podcasting made it safe for me to do it, but still keep myself somewhat private because I didn't always have to post the video. I could just share the information I was finding. And I think over time, just through doing it more and more, I realized like it is okay to talk about these things. Like I can form coherent sentences around this, and it has made me able to talk to people in my real life more easily, like to fall into these conversations and to feel more comfortable expressing myself. Um,
I'm
so
sure
that
you
is,
have the thing where you have like the podcast voice and then you have like your normal voice too. And when you get off the
yeah,
podcast, you're like over enunciating things or like really loud when you talk. Like I got that
yeah,
same thing going on too. Like a little part of my story that I forgot to mention too. When I was in high school, I had a broadcasting class for it started when you were a sophomore and you can run it through senior year. And I was on staff for all of that. I was also on in my film class because it was all part of like somewhat at the same class. It was all the same classroom, but it was split into two, and I was in both. But the one that I always kind of gravitated towards, of course, was the radio because I like being heard
uh-huh,
and not necessarily seen. And when I do
same.
all the video projects, back then I was really good at editing and I do all the projects and I wouldn't have myself in any of my videos. My teacher would be like, why don't you want to put yourself in the video? And I'm like, well, I'm directing it and I'm editing it. Why do I want to be in it if I'm telling people what to do? Like,
Hmm.
and that was fun when I was doing it because I knew the program, but now it's like I have to relearn a whole program and it's like I don't necessarily want to do it. But the broadcasting stuff, like I was supposed to go to college for it, didn't end up going because of some stuff in life that happened. So kind of came full circle with that because it was just another weird collaboration I forgot to add in there that I was also doing radio already. So it's just kind of full circle, everything kind of came together eventually.
Yeah, that's cool. Your high school offered that. They did not offer that in my rinky-dink uh small town high
They
school at
straight up
all.
had an FM station. We had like a tower at the school. It was weird. I
Nice.
think it was like the only one in Michigan that had it, and it was like in our high school that we had a straight up like FM channel. Like it was
Wow,
weird.
that's
We had to be
cool.
very conscious because like if you swore on the radio, like it would
Uh-huh.
be a couple $1,000 fine. So like they
Yeah.
were adamant. Like we had to run that program like it was like professional radio station. Like it wasn't just
Yeah.
like a fluff off class. Like it was a radio station.
Right, to the public. Yeah,
Yeah.
I that's really cool. My husband did radio. He worked for the local radio station and it would accidentally played a song that had the F word in it and it was like a whole thing. So I remember the stress of filtering yourself more. I'm glad that we don't have to worry about that so much with our own shows because I don't know. I feel like that would stress me out. Like, oh my God, I dropped an F-bomb and now I'm gonna have to pay a thousand
Yeah, see, that's the
dollars.
problem. The only thing that I will say was a huge plus that I'm still conscious of is my radio teacher used to do this thing where he'd listen obviously all day in the main area to make sure nobody like swore or anything on the radio. And if anybody said he would come into the studio and he'd point at you and go So it made people like super conscious of saying
I need that.
So it helped me out a lot where I'll do this thing where I do like an extended pause instead of saying but it's like you almost need that sometimes if somebody just running in and just calling it out because that was probably the most beneficial. I don't. The whole radio station class was beneficial, but for me as a person doing a podcast and learning how to talk on the radio, that single weird little thing was probably the most beneficial thing I've ever had that has helped me with my radio, with talking on the radio. It was just
You're right.
being called out for saying and then becoming conscious of it.
Yes. I've always wished that I had like some kind of electrocution thing where every time you do it, you get like zapped until you just finally stop doing it.
You gotta
Um,
like trick your brain. You just like extend the word, the last word you say, or you like
uh-huh.
leave an extended pause
Right. Just
and
don't say anything. If you could
you just
just
got to
take a
rewire your
breath.
brain a little bit. Yeah. Because
Yes.
then you just add a dramatic pause and it just draws people into the conversation more. Instead of saying, you just go, well, this could be like this. And it draws people in more.
Right, right. Absolutely. My other thing is, and I always
I do
say it,
that one too.
you know, you know. It's like
I got my
my
son doing
southern
that
drawl.
now. And he's walking around going, no, no. I'm like, dude, you sound like a little European guy. Stop walking around asking me something and saying no.
That's funny. I love how they pick up our stuff.
Not you know. He just says no.
All right. So one of the things that you cover on your show that I've been interested in looking into more and talking with you about because you're one of the few people that I know that keeps up with this stuff is a little while back we had a lot of these UFO sightings and it was all this disclosure. I mean, it was on like the main news channels. I was seeing it everywhere. And then suddenly it just stopped. And I don't think I've heard much about it since as far as like the mainstream media. Um, do you have an opinion or have you heard anything about that particular point where they were like full disclosure to now where it's like it's not talked about any longer? You know what's happened in the course of time to cause that?
I mean, I feel like it's one of those things that's definitely gone in waves. Like I talked about this recently on a show that in the 90s it was all show me the bodies, and then you get
Hmm.
into now and it's all show me the UFOs. It seems
Right.
like it's one of these things that they're trying to push the disclosure movement to kind of trickle feed multiple things while in the process kind of muddying the waters. Like it seems
Hmm.
like they're almost trying to like pull it back farther where originally there was this technology that nobody really had much of an explanation for. So everybody's
Right.
main focus was show me the bodies, who's in it, what's piloting it, what's the main idea that's going on here. And obviously with the UFO community, unlike any other weird facet of strange anomalous communities, there's definitely this heavy government involvement in it. And it
Hmm.
seems like it's transitioned into this place now where they want people to be asking, where are they coming from? What the questions moved away from what's inside of them, and it's rather like where are they coming from?
Hmm.
And my question is it a matter of them trying to push people away from the extraterrestrial perspective necessarily so that they can start pretending like they're can claim some of this technology, or is it on the flip side that they're trying to move people away from the question of who is giving this technology so that when we all of a sudden have this technology, people are just going to start associating it with human technology. But it's such a muddied water community because you have all the ideas with like Project Bluebeam, for example, where, this whole idea is that the government is going to make this fake alien invasion and then they're going to use that as a means to be able to reunite everybody under this war front of, fighting off the UFOs and fighting off the aliens. So you got like that going on at the same time with them trying to take credit for some of this stuff. Like it's one of those points now where the water is so muddy that nobody knows what direction to go with it because you have stuff coming out with the UFOs from the US government and all after years of them saying like, oh, we don't ask any questions about this, we don't ask any questions about it, and all of a sudden you get bombarded with it, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, we have alien bodies now, and then you see the alien bodies and they look super duper fake. So it's like the people in the UFO community have wanted nothing but to have disclosure for this type of stuff, and then as soon as the government starts quote disclosing stuff,
Yeah.
they make it so unbelievable that it's just like the UFO community doesn't even believe anything that's
Right.
coming from them. And not to necessarily talk bad about the guy because I feel like he may have had good intentions, but the person that they have run the UFO organization is Tom DeLonge from Blink 182, and it's like the average person isn't going to take a rock star seriously when it comes to this phenomenon, but yet this is the guy that they chose for it. And I mean, again, I don't think necessarily he was doing any wrong. I think that he may have had some of the best intentions for this, but he
Hmm.
didn't realize that he was going to be used as a mockery. And
Right.
just to get even more into muddying the waters, the newest thing that's been coming out is this new thing with a whistleblower about may have actually happened with the Roswell crash. And actually, I have a clip that I looked up before we started talking that I can play on it, and then we can kind
Okay.
of discuss it a little bit here. But just because I want to make sure I get the information here correctly, this is just a quick 25-second clip talking about the new whistleblowing information.
Okay.
A Wall Street Journal report last week revealed the Pentagon officials deliberately propagated UFO myths, including those centered around Area 51, to conceal classified programs such as the F-117 Nighthawk stealth aircraft during the Cold War. Disinformation efforts included fabricating and distributing doctored UFO photos, conducting internal hazing rituals on low-level military personnel. These campaigns misled both the public and many within the military, leading to some officers believing the myths for decades.
So, for anybody that may not have caught what that guy was explaining, now the new whistleblower disclosure information that's coming out is that they're saying that the crash from Roswell was actually government misinformation to be able to hide advanced flying aircraft, that they were basically saying that these crash pieces and these place pieces and this information that they were trickling out to low-level soldiers was all intended to be a facade to be able to hide their advanced aircrafts and pretend like they were UFOs. So it's just, again, a million different directions. They're saying, all right, everybody, pay attention to the UFOs. And then now there's this new whistleblower coming out saying, all right, all the UFOs were psyops. And before I continue on ranting too much, because I could go on this one for like an hour, like my question with this newest thing is you got to kind of view things a little bit farther back when it comes to this UFO phenomenon. And when you kind of look at this newest information coming out, you got to kind of view it from, yes, it could be completely as they say it is, or on the flip side, like what could the other possible outcome be of trying to almost disprove anybody coming out as whistleblowing? I mean, that's the whole thing right there, is that there's this back and forth in the government that Congress is trying to dive into all of this hidden information that's been, being researched by multiple organizations that have been hidden under black budget programs. And those black budget programs are also trying to hide themselves. So with this new information, what I think that they're intending to do is now when a whistleblower comes out, they're going to say, all right, where's solid proof of this so we can research into it? Because, last time we heard about a whistleblower, they were bringing us pieces from Area 51 and they were saying all this Area 51 stuff was going on, but the other aspects of the government are now saying that they were doing it. So now, we can't even believe the whistleblower. So which direction do we go with this? Like, I can't explain enough. It's just so much back and forth. They're just trying to whiplash people so that they have no idea which direction to go with any of this phenomenon. But it's like you got to give a bunch of chaos, and then you kind of drop these little things in here because the little things start kind of disproving and throwing another wrench into all the other stuff. But like I said, this is like some supposed big news, but all of a sudden these articles can't be found after they were all over the place for like 2 days. Like so much psyop stuff with the UFO community. It's so hard to follow on top of all the million different theories and ideas, even within the UFO community. But long rant, I apologize, but
No,
trying to lay some of the groundwork on all this crazy stuff going on. Like it's like opening up a floodgate. I apologize.
No, I love talking about this. And I do agree that it's like keeping the water muddied because they want people to be so confused. And, even if they were to see something that was real or if they were to hear something that was truth, nobody trusts any of the information anymore. But it was alarming to me how the people that I know that are doing like these C5 meditations and they are all about connecting to the extraterrestrials. When this stuff first started coming out, they called bullshit like early on and they were like, this is not real. And it's like, it's so crazy to me that those are the people that approached it more groundedly and was like looking at, the pictures more and studying it through a more logical perspective. And then the people that I knew that were really against all the alien stuff were like, well, I'm starting to believe in aliens now. And I'm just like, that is so interesting how it worked on the people that I would never have considered being open-minded to extraterrestrials. And then the ones that have been waiting their whole lives, for the public to look at them as, bringing this important information forward. They've studied, they've had these experiences, they've been gaslit and all this. And now they're like, this isn't it. Like, this isn't it.
See, that's just a matter of, again, trying to control the narrative on this whole thing.
Right.
And even on the flip side, it's like maybe they're trying to kind of throw it so much in people's faces for the time being so that people kind of get bored of it. Maybe if they like slam it enough in people's faces and then they don't show it for a little bit, maybe we're in like a spot just where they're trying to see if like, all right, how much are people still talking about it? Like maybe we're in the eye of the storm before they just whiplash a bunch of more stuff at people so that, again, they have no idea which direction to go with it. But at least me as a person, like out of all of the different weird phenomenons that's going on, like, paranormal, cryptids, UFO, like all this stuff, the most logical thing, in my opinion, that could exist out of any of it is definitely extraterrestrials. Like knowing how vast the universe is, knowing even just some of like the theories on how life could have potentially got onto this planet or how it could have potentially formed. to me, it's not a question of is there other life out in the universe? It definitely exists out there. It's just a matter of one, like what's the level of intelligence? Has it actually been here before? Are we dealing with something that's a little bit closer of a threat? Again, it's not a matter of does it exist. It's just what capacity does it exist in? What facade might it exist under? What dimension or reality, if you start getting into astrophysics, does it exist in? But it's like we've moved beyond that question as a community of, it's not like a lot of cryptids where people say like, I believe this exists. Like people in the UFO community, it's not a question. It's like, yes, these extraterrestrials exist. It's just, what are they? What do they want? What are they doing? But now it's gotten to this weird point where the general public's like, oh, extraterrestrials could exist. And it's like, well, yeah, welcome to the party. But like, it's logical that these things exist. Like, I don't understand how people could spend their whole life just not even, aliens don't exist. That could never happen. Like, are you really like that self-centered as a being on this planet that you don't realize that we are extremely minuscule in the broad span of the entire universe? Like we're nothing. Like we're tiny. We're a little tiny speck. Like the universe is a lot broader than that. There is other life out there. There's no way that there isn't. Like
Right. And I feel like through movies, and this happens with some of my more esoteric and occult studies as well, it's pushed through this fear lens that I think some people want to detach from the idea because it scares them, because it's always the invasion. It's never like these beings are out there and, they're doing their own thing. They're not necessarily always obsessed with Earth. It's like it's been presented through this lens of like they're going to attack us. I watched Mars Attacks when I was in kindergarten, and it really messed me up, man. I had nightmares about those particular versions of aliens for a very long time. And I don't know, I almost feel like it's there to distort it or to make people afraid so they don't even want to go there, or to create like bad dreams, or even almost imprint certain images like in that astral plane. So like when you are having a dream and an alien comes in, it always looks like the way the grays are presented, and I really would think from my own perspective that there would be a lot of variety, that they wouldn't all look the same, that they wouldn't all have the same intentions and, the same mannerisms and everything. But it's like they're really stuck on like that gray perspective of what they might look like with the big eyes and there's not a lot of diversity in what they show in the films.
I mean, that could also be partially intentional. Like, I definitely think that there's a human facet to UFO abduction phenomenon. I did an episode on it, connecting in with like the rise of all this weird technology during World War II, going into like MK Ultra and all these mind control experiments. And then directly after that, that's when a bunch of these UFO abduction main cases started happening. So, and a lot of like the research that gets explained is also seemingly very close to like what some of the Nazi research was. So not necessarily saying it's specifically Nazi research, but this like occult medical type research. Like, I definitely think that there is a huge facet of the phenomenon that's continued on from that, where it's hidden under the facade, where like, for just to give an example, like a UFO will fly over. The government says, all right, well, not a perfect time to fly some advanced aircraft to see if it works. We'll hide under the facade of that. Or you have a flap of a UFO abductions happening, and you go, all right, perfect. Let's go run some experiments on people and hide it under this flap because it'll just kind of exist within this flap. So I definitely think there's a huge facet of that to the phenomenon. But in the broader perspective of the phenomenon, it's like you definitely have people interacting with other things. But on the flip side, it does seem like the main one that people interact with may be the grays. But there could be multiple answers for that. Either one, maybe they're the closest to us in location, wherever that location might be. Or even getting into some of the more recent theories, or I guess it probably dates back in a lot older stuff, but the aspect that the grays might not actually be these aliens or extraterrestrials that we think they are, but something that's existed here or maybe even predates us, or was a civilization that predates us that happened to go underground, which kind of fits, the gray facade, the look, the eyes, because you'd have bigger eyes to see in a darker place, you'd develop the grayer skin. So that is definitely a facet that kind of comes in with this whole thing. Or even on the flip side, the third option is that maybe that's the one that, for whatever reason, has an interest in us. And one way that it can definitely be looked at, and I'm sure a lot of researchers have probably brought this up, is almost like how we would observe animals. That, from their perspective, it looks like we're doing something hellish to them. Like if you pick up a fish and you tag it, or you take an animal and you tag it, or you do whatever, for that, the experience for that animal is probably pretty hellish. Like you're taking it out of the water, you feel like you're torturing it, and then you just throw it back, and they're like, "Oh my God, what the heck just happened to me?" It seems pretty close to the UFO abduction phenomenon. So, if we're dealing with these advanced beings that are significantly more advanced than us, it may not be this whole abduction idea, or not abduction, but this whole there's just destruction, completely annihilate the entire planet idea with these things. It could just be a matter of almost like how we want to perceive nature and how we want to view nature. That they come, they explore, they bag, they tag, but at the end they just want to observe. They're not here to destroy everything. Like if we're keeping an eye on a pond, it's not like we're bagging, we're tagging, we're taking care of them. We're kind of viewing them from a broader perspective, but our whole intention isn't necessarily to kill every single fish in that pond. So, I mean, that's definitely another perspective to the phenomenon. But again, like I was saying earlier, like there's so many different directions you can go in with this alien phenomenon that I feel like all we've been doing for years is throwing shit at a wall, hoping it'll stick. And some stuff seems to stick. But the hard part that gets really messed up with the UFO community is the UFO cults, the extraterrestrial cults, and then you start digging into their phenomenon, and then they start pulling things from older esoteric ideas. They start pulling things from older philosophies. So in turn, they end up muddying the waters. And then just like in every other community, it's like you have these people that come and they're like, I know the answer. I don't think I know the answer. I know the answer. And then you have 5 people like that that are all telling you totally different answers. So it's just, I don't know. It's just so many different directions. Like it's such a hard topic to just pinpoint and talk about because you want to talk about one perspective, but you don't want to be biased and you want to try to give people all the different angles and perspectives. But there's so many of them that it's just like you don't know what direction to go with people. Like it's just, again, the waters are so muddied at this point that it's not like I feel like how it used to be back in the day where it felt like it was this kind of single track phenomenon that we were kind of following, or it was like, here's an abduction case. Let's follow it. Here's a weird crash case. Let's follow it. Now it's like everybody's coming out. They have UFO abduction cases. They have this, they have that. They're all saying different things. Like it's become such a hard phenomenon to try to follow and track now because it's just so broad. And maybe it's advancing technology, or maybe it's other races coming here, or, maybe it's even more government psyop happening. But it's just, it's so hard to follow.
Exactly. I think that's what they want. That's what they want to happen with it. But yeah, I've looked at it from these different perspectives because, I watched something with Dolores Cannon a long time ago, and she was really into UFO phenomena, and she looked at them as like helpers and that they would connect with like their own. So like if they were doing like abductions or they were working with someone in that individual way, it was because that was like they were almost like a relative to some extent. Like they were either an ancestor or there was some kind of like lineage, and that's why they were drawn to certain people like over others. And the way she viewed it, it felt like kind of like a contract before they came here, like that they might need assistance or something like that. And when I heard it from that perspective, it did help a little bit of thinking of it not from a fear place, but of like they're helping recalibrate, they're working with people's energetic bodies or whatever. Instead of just saying like, oh, these people are getting abducted and mutilated and, violated. And I had never seen anyone take the other approach. So I was like, okay, that's interesting to think about. Like they're trying to assist, like you're saying, like to study, but this took it another step further of like they're actually trying to support. And it's almost like there was certain humans that still had, I don't know, maybe like more like their structures were different. So they might have needed different kind of upgrades so that they could exist in human form or something. But I don't know. I thought her perspective on UFOs felt a little bit more enlightening and a little less fear-based. But like then again, I'm not saying that she's like all factual and that everything that she says is true just because it's from her, but I tend to respect her curiosity, and how she does look at it from different angles, and she tries to see the light side of it and not just like, oh my gosh, like we're being taken advantage of, and because that's all I had seen until hearing that from her.
See, I mean, that can even go in a million different angles too, because we try to put everything in a human perspective of good and evil. But I don't think other things work like that. Like even other things in nature, like just because a lion kills, it doesn't make it evil. It's just doing what its natural job is to do and what it was programmed to
Right.
do. So we try to put everything in this human lens, and for lack of a better term, I hate using the words demons, but
Hmm.
in especially when it comes to this UFO phenomenon, because it kind of gets into this whole weird thing with the Collins elite and if are they demons, blah 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 blah. And I don't want to get into that whole facet of things, but just the idea of demons, the whole idea of these like dark presence of whatever it is that's existed through time, those things are more than happy to manipulate you or let you believe whatever you want to believe. So if these things
Hmm.
come and you go, "Are you God?" and they go, "Yes, I am God." Like you can call me whatever you want as long as you're acknowledging me, and then they kind of get the doorway in from there. So it's like I think I guess to kind of bring it into like a broader perspective, not necessarily these things are good or evil, but they're going to come in through whatever kind of lane you invite them into, and you're going to view them through whatever perspective you
Right.
want to view them through. So the same two people can have the same experience. One can have a lightning experience, the other one can have an awful experience. It's just a matter of like which way you want to view them because like even these like light beings that come,
Hmm.
there's a lot of like weirdness to those and people want to say that they're like angelic, that they have good to them, that they have good intentions, but if you were trying to manipulate people into thinking you were good, that would be the way to do it. So you have to consider if these things have been studying us for years and years and years and years, centuries, thousands of years, who knows? They're going to know how to manipulate the human psyche because even us as people have learned how to do that. Like you start
Hmm.
looking into psychology and realize how deep that is. And then you start getting the occult and realize that a lot of that seems to be this master understanding of psychology. So if you spend your since centuries observing something, you're going to know how to manipulate it. And whether your intentions are good or bad, again, completely human perspective on that, you're going to know how to get these people to do what you want them to do and how to feel however you want them to feel. Because, if you're trying to do an experiment, but you don't want this person to be freaking out during the whole experiment, what not a better way to come than to say that you're a light being and you have all these answers and these healing factors and this and that and this. And even with some of those people that have like healing, there's definitely some positive cases that come out where nothing ends up coming back. But then there's other cases where, something will be healed on somebody and then all of a sudden later on they end up having radiation sickness. So it's like you
Hmm.
take something and then you get something else. It almost kind of seems like this whole contract with the devil, so to speak.
Hmm.
And this is something that I talk about on the show that I think a lot of this stuff is in a broader perspective. It's not that this is a demon. It's not that this is this. It's not that this is this. It's that these are the perspectives that different groups and cultures of people have observed the same creatures through. And
Hmm.
then in turn, through telephone, through retelling stories orally, they've taken on their own facets where we're seeing this and this and this and this is a bunch of different things, but they're not different things. They're all the same thing. It's just under different names because different societies are viewing them in different ways.
Hmm.
And I mean, even getting into not to broaden this into an even bigger perspective, but the reason I like to entertain stuff from like the Christian and like the pagan perspective on things is
Hmm.
because you start looking at these stories and then you see like the whole idea of the fallen angels. And then the whole idea of the fallen angels kind of fits in with the whole idea of like the Greek pantheon, with the Roman pantheon. And it's not, again, necessarily that these are the fallen angels because that's under one perspective, but you start viewing all these things and you see that it seems like they're all just different perspectives of the same story. And again, it's not that anything's necessarily good or evil. It's just whatever lane you want to try to view this thing through. So it's so hard to differentiate what these things are that are significantly above our thinking capacity, and to ever think that we're ever going to have a leg up on these things if they're significantly more advanced than us is completely laughable. So as soon as we start quote trying to understand the phenomenon, like they're already another century ahead of us at that point. Like we're never going to catch up to these things. So we'll never know until they choose to present themselves and give the information. And even if they do, they can completely give it bias to us and we're going to believe it because it's through our perspective.
Right. Right. Yeah, someone's work that I really respect and I've been really open to receiving is Barbara Handclough, who comes from the Cherokee tradition. And she wrote the book, The Pleiadian Agenda. And I just recently shared this little clip from a Gaia episode that said that Cherokee creation storytellers were able to share their origin story publicly for the first time. And it was connected to Pleiadians, like these light beings traveling through a beam of light. And it was connected to East Tennessee, so it stood out to me because I live in East Tennessee. And they came in through a portal, and the Cherokee were the guardians of that portal. And it really stood out to me because I'd already read Barbara Handcloud's Pleiadian Agenda before I heard that, and had my own connection to Pleiadian energy before any of that. So it just kept showing up in my awareness. But it
Just a quick
seems
state it, by the way. I'm not saying these things are good or evil. All I'm stating,
right.
by the way, is to take everything with a grain of salt, whether it's
Oh,
saying good or evil.
absolutely.
Not to cut you off. I
Absolutely.
just wanted to preface that I'm not trying to mean either way. Just take everything with a grain of salt, you know?
I like that. I think I like having some imagination and like being a little bit open to how you might envision it is important, and also being grounded so that you don't get lost, way out in the cosmos when you actually did come here to be a human. So whether you're a starseed or not, it's like, well, you're a human right now. So, but I really liked her bringing in this indigenous perspective of like, this isn't new. It's not new to think that we came from the stars, that our origins as human beings actually weren't on Earth, that that was a place that it's almost like we traveled from, these other places in space to be here on Earth for whatever reason. And I don't exactly know that reason, but I felt like it to me it felt a little bit more grounded since she is coming from that culture that is rooted in this, and it's not just some new idea. It's something that they've passed along since the beginning, right? This is what they actually believe was part of their creation. And it's so direct, like from the Pleiades, beings of light, all of these things. And I just wonder, like to talk to someone from that tradition of like, does any of this even sound far out to you? Because you've already kind of been more open-minded to viewing things multiple dimensionally almost, like so I don't know. She's somebody that I've been more open to kind of learning from just based on her ties to the indigenous perspective.
So even with the like indigenous stories, like sometimes they're hard because some are extremely literal and some are extremely like metaphorical, where they're kind of
Right.
like are dancing around an idea, not necessarily because they weren't trying to be direct, but because they were trying to describe it with the best language that they had at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And just to connect in a possible, idea behind this, if I'm sure you probably heard of the whole theory about life traveling through space essentially and crashing onto Earth through through asteroids, that there was little tiny
Mm-hmm.
bacterias and they crashed onto the planet and that kind of like sparked life. I mean, there could definitely be a possibility to that being some type of explanation that,
Right.
maybe these white beams were asteroids and the life that
Mm,
came from the Pleiades was, these little microscopic bacterias and life started from there.
that was like the
And
direction it came from.
yes. So, I mean, even it could have came from there directly. I mean, it could have literally came from that system and that asteroid made it all the way here, crashed here and started the planet. So it's like matter of perspective. Like
Mm-hmm.
you, you don't know whether to take it extremely literally that it was like a beam of light that brought the light beings here, or if
Right.
it was metaphorically a beam of light that they saw across the sky that brought life here, or that something
Right.
saw and was able to document that could have been carried on from another thing. Because it seems like with a lot of this Native American origin stories, it seems like they talk about worlds that existed before their
Mm-hmm.
world. So I'm
Right.
sure it's probably no different with the Cherokee. So,
Mm-hmm.
if these light beings were being observed, there could have been something else here that saw that, documented it, and then
Right.
passed it on to whatever is here. So again, is it as literal as they think it is, or could it be something that's a little bit more different perspective? Like even
Mm-hmm.
just to bring in another connection, the whole burning bush that everybody's heard about, in the
Mm-hmm.
Bible. You start diving into that and you realize that I'm kind of Arcadian bush or something like that. I don't want. I want to make sure I say it correctly. But either way, it's a psychedelic plant that when you burn it, it gives off a psychedelic effect. And it's like, people
Uh-huh.
are thinking of the burning bush, but it may not be in that sense of a literal burning bush. It could be in the sense of burning a bush and then speaking to God. But it's
Mm-hmm.
a matter of
Mm-hmm.
like word interpretation. Like, do you interpret it weird or do you take it literally? Same stuff
Right.
with a lot of these origin stories with the extraterrestrial perspective on things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like looking at it through the logical lens too, but also being open to like what would that look like? Like what would that if I were to take it literally, how might that manifest? But then also maybe, you think about when things are passed down through that oral tradition, they have to have some kind of it has to be interesting, it has to be exciting, or it's not a fun story to retell. And so I feel like they sprinkle things into it just to make it more entertaining and more easy to remember to pass down over time. But then so, if we aren't raised in certain traditions, it's going to be harder for us to know like what were they actually referring to. Um, and which parts are literal because sometimes it's like these little seeds are planted within these myths and it is so hard to know what part of their culture were they preserving when they said this. We lose so much over the course of time when we don't have people to represent some of those older cultures to keep them alive for us. So it's like we have to play around and kind of just come up with our own theories about it, but I think that that's really fun to do. I really enjoy trying to make the connections.
No, I mean even to connect in another one with Cherokee, like the whole idea of like the Thunderbird, that they were like these,
Mm.
you know, overseers that would like protect them from the Uktena. They were like these things that would bring in storms, and they would like flap, and it would make, they would have all these like these magical powers. But then on the other
Mm-hmm.
side of it, you could definitely view it from the perspective of, yes, there were these giant birds, and when they
Mm-hmm.
flapped, it sounded like thunder. So, is it as literal as these things were literally these mythological creatures, or is it that they were giant birds that when they flapped, it sounded like thunder, and we're just misinterpreting what they were trying to explain exactly? I mean,
Right. And then
it's
if you
explaining it
think,
two different ways, but take it how you want to.
right, and if you think about like these egregores that can be created within the astral plane, you tell the story, somebody comes up with this being and they tell the story over and over and over again for, hundreds of years and people start believing in it. And now it's like connected to this collective unconscious. So people are able to tune right in when you say it because the story, this archetype has now been personified in such a way that it's almost like this universal thing that we can all understand, even though it is more symbolic. But because so many people have believed in it over time, it almost is like it develops this living essence to it and creates like this whole life of its own even if it's just like in that astral plane. It's interesting to think about that too, is how much the myths play on like building up the archetypes within the collective unconscious.
I mean, look at fairies as a prime example of that. Like
Hmm.
all of the ancient stories of fairies, they weren't something that you wanted to tangle with. Even like the Native Americans with the little people, it's like, yeah, we leave them alone. They stay over there. But thanks to storytelling through the years,
Hmm.
telephone, Disney movies, children's movies, now people's perspective of fairies is these light, little, happy, ha 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 type beings.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of this weird thing where it's like, people are weirdly enough reporting like a lot of like Fae encounters lately,
Hmm.
but it almost seems like they're using that as a manipulation to trick people better, that they kind of have this like, oh, he, and then they get angry when you don't notice them like that. Like I had somebody on the show recently that was talking about Nomar Slevik, to throw in a name because he's a really good guy. He writes about all this weird phenomenon that's happening in Maine. And one of the stories that he covered in his most recent book was this sighting that somebody had of these fairies. And he said that they basically, just to paraphrase it, they came into the tent, they were looking all like happy, like frilly, twirling in front of him and everything. And they were trying to like beckon to him, like, go with us, come with us. And he was like, no, I'm staying here. And then he said they got all pissed off, turned into a beam of light and took off. And then he saw their like true face and looked at these like little, like evil looking creatures, where it's like, you look at the old folklore of it, and most people described the Fae as like these little vulgar troll like mean little creatures. And
Hmm.
then again, the facade got changed into all they're these happy, pretty little creatures. So now it's like the phenomenon uses what you've interpreted as to also manipulate you later on. Which same with
Right.
this extraterrestrial shit, to go back full circle with this. All
Hmm.
this stuff that we've trickle fed into what the alien phenomenon is, no matter what these things look like they're significantly more advanced than us, and who knows what technology they could potentially be capable of. Like we already have the ability to create these like fake masks that are completely realistic where you'd never even know what the person looks like underneath it. So if you have a culture that's could be thousands, if not millions of years more advanced than us, who's to say they don't have some type of cloaking device or some type of prosthetics that they can put on to look a specific way? And if there's something that, we've never seen before, we don't even know how to remotely understand, if they're trying to do something, it's going to make it a lot more difficult if they got to get past that initial fear. Like if people know what they're dealing with, then it still is, of course, like a high fear moment, but at least you like know what you're dealing with. So like these things, no matter what they look like, could just be taking this phenomenon look of grays just so that people, when they look at them, go, all right, I'm dealing with an alien. And that's where you get into this whole idea of like the constantly changing phenomenon. Like the phenomenon's always changing its face. Like it's always something different. It's always slightly changing as time goes on. So it's like, is the phenomenon itself shifting, or is it rather that the phenomenon is shifting as our perspectives change to fit our perspectives and do whatever it needs to do? Like the UFO phenomenon relating a lot to the old Fae phenomenon. It's like it changed the face, that it looked like this Fae, and now we kind of observe it as this alien thing. But weirdly enough, the Fae stuff's starting to come back as people are getting more into the nature side of things. Like it seems like it's always shifting to be able to be one step ahead of us, no matter what it is. And all this phenomenon connects, weirdly enough. Specifically, the UFO and the Fae stuff is like hand in hand, weird, like down to the time slip moments, like people losing time. Like the more you start diving, the more that you're into the UFO phenomenon, you start diving into the Fae, the less ridiculous the Fae sounds. Because when you just hear fairies, you hear about all this stuff, it sounds preposterous. It sounds like folklore. But then you start looking at these finite details of people going in through time slips, missing time, coming back 6 months later and not looking like they've aged or changed at all. Then you're like, wow, like this is really, really close. Even down to the whole trying to lure you away to somewhere dark to make you disappear for a while. Like it doesn't seem so ridiculous when you start connecting it into the UFO phenomenon and realizing that more than likely it is probably part of the same phenomenon.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I think it was Ledbetter, the Theosophical writer, that when I was doing a deep dive into his astral plane book, he talks about the Fae. And in the lower astral hue, a lot of these beings are shapeshifters. And so it's incredibly hard if you get stuck in the lower astral plane because everybody can shapeshift. And it's hard to trust anything that you see there. But if you think about, we all have an astral body and we are, always connected to it. Even though when we're asleep, we're more conscious in that plane. It makes me wonder if when they're seeing them, it's almost like at that point their consciousness is like in between. And so they're able to see that lower astral hue, but because it's the lower aspect of it, they're getting tricked. Like they're falling for these more trickster-like beings which exist in that part of the astral plane. But yeah, he was definitely he talked about fairies and said something about them. They don't really prefer humans to see them. So a lot of times if you do see them, it's either because they want you to or because you've pissed them off and they're trying to actively kind of confuse you or get you to look another way. So I think that's where like they turn into the scary thing. So it's like, leave me alone. Or it's like a protective thing.
See, and if you get into the other dimensions, other realities aspect of things, you can also kind of look at the perspective of, biblical angels, not to keep bringing stuff back to this, but, the whole idea of how they're described with all the different eyes and the spinning wheels and the wings and everything, like what we're perceiving is definitely something different than their true form. And the same could be said with a lot of this stuff that, it's kind of like looking at something in a different reality. Like the best way to kind of relate it is if you're underwater and you're looking at a ball, it looks like a giant circle. But as soon as you leave the water, you realize it's a giant sphere and then it takes on a totally different shape than what you think it does.
Right.
Stuff could be coming into our reality and we're looking at it from one perspective, one view, because our brains don't understand and process the idea of something and how it would look in a higher dimension. So we're looking at it from our view when that may not even be how the thing looks. We're just looking at a portion of it because it can't be perceived in this dimension that it's in. It could be something from a higher dimension. It could be something from a side dimension, or like you mentioned, it could be even something from a lower dimension, but we're used to the way our structure of our dimension is. So regardless of which direction it comes from, we're more than likely not going to see it in its full view.
Right. There's going to be some distortions just based on the lens that we're able to perceive it out of, based on our own conditioning and our own openness to what we're seeing. Because I think, we almost can create the distortion almost out of like this cognitive dissonance of like, we don't want to see it that way. So we're going to put this filter on.
We do
And
that
that's
to
a,
ourselves and to kids. We tell them from a
yeah.
young age that they're not seeing what they're seeing. And I question, like, do these kids see what they think they're seeing? And we just tell them that they don't see it. And then your brain gets to a point where you just start filtering this stuff out because you see it as useless information. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
some people stay aware of, mediumship abilities through their whole life, is because they don't break that filter away that their brain just says, all right, useless information, and processes it out. Because there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of our environment that we just don't process because our brains have learned to tune out all of this excess information to only stay
Right.
focused on what we need. Like, how much are we really tuning out? That's the real question.
Right, just based on our own beliefs. And, logic is our friend, but sometimes it can kill like that imagination. And then it's almost like when we have those experiences, if we only approach them logically, it's like we taint it through that. And so I feel like that's why it's good to have a balance of both, that wonder and that curiosity and also the logic, just to help you stay grounded, but not to prevent you from potentially having these experiences just because you always have this explanation for how to justify that it's not real all the time, which, which is most of the population goes straight to that all the time. So,
That's why when I do my research and a lot of my stuff on my shows, it's like I try to give the most logical answer I could possibly give. And then on the other side, I'm like, all right, here's the, for lack of a better term, woo woo possibility to this. Like,
mhm.
I try to address it from both sides. Like, I'm always saying this idea that you want to be a skeptic, but you want to be open minded at the same time. Because,
Right.
like you were saying, you don't want to cancel yourself out from the possibly anomalous, but you also don't want to only view the anomalous and cancel out the obvious. And like a
Right,
prime
right.
example for this one is always paranormal investigators. You hear some weird tapping. You got to do the logical investigation of, is there any old pipes? Is there faulty wiring? Is there any of this type of stuff? And then once that's gone, then you can get into your, all right, we have something here and we can start researching it from there. But in order to get to that point, I always tell people you got to rule it out from both angles to know what you're dealing with. Because, if everything is a ghost, then you're not going to get anywhere with the research. And if you say that everything is this without doing more research into it, say everything's a bump in the night without doing research into it, then you're never going to get anywhere either. You have to have this good middle ground where you kind of address it from both angles. And then once you have both perspectives, say, all right, which one makes the most sense? Which one can I do more exploration on? And you can
Hmm.
keep side tangenting those ideas, but you're going to have one where it's like, all right, here's the people that base things in science are going to be more towards, and then here's the people that are going to base things in spirituality are more towards. It's
Hmm.
not that any answer is necessarily wrong. It's just, maybe that spirituality answer doesn't have enough science caught up to it yet, because I feel like a lot of this stuff that's spiritual, that's, you know, mystical, it's
Hmm.
not necessarily that it's magic, that it's anything that's unobtainable. It's just a matter of we haven't advanced enough to a point where we can understand it through science. Because even like the astral realm, the whole idea about these like energies and vibrations and everything, like this is something that's been talked about for centuries when it comes to a lot of this occult and pagan
Hmm.
type thinking on things. But with modern science, we're starting to get to a point where we're realizing all of this stuff with vibration and frequency and all this stuff. It's just a matter of time before all this stuff starts to line up. And my argument, I always say, is like alchemy, is viewed as magic. Eventually, it turned into a science when we discovered it to be chemistry. It's just a
Right.
matter of, with more understanding these woo-woo concepts that people can't bring their head around, we'll get to a point where we have step by step, this is how this is the answer, and then
Hmm.
people will finally be able to bring their head around it and understand it. Like even the
Right.
whole like astrophysics ideas, it's like dimensions, interdimensions, all this type of stuff. Like you were talking about this like 20 years ago, and it's all completely theoretical science, and now we're getting to the point where we're like, all right, it doesn't seem so theoretical now. We have the ability, we have the theory on how to do this. It's just, we haven't fully unlocked the capacity of it yet. But, we're observing black holes in space. We're doing all this
Hmm.
stuff. It's just a matter with more understanding. Eventually, it'll turn into a science and people will kind of all catch up with it. But until then, you need to have your logical answer and your woo woo answer to bring it full circle.
Right. And keep your curiosity alive so that, if people aren't willing to explore these things, then there is not going to be anyone trying to prove them or doing the more advanced research. It takes us and our own curiosity asking these questions to bring it about. So I really love your work and the people that do approach it through both of these lenses and keep the magic alive, and sharing these stories with other people so that they have, these their own experiences, and then they hear these other ones and they're like, okay, that sounds similar. I'm going to start investigating that because I must not be making this up if there's 1,000 other people who have also had almost verbatim this same kind of encounter. So I really like how we have the ability to share these stories now, and someone might Google this weird experience and relate it to these other people who've had it. So it feels a less isolating. And I think the more people come together and share their stories, on podcasts like yours, it helps create that community, that safe space for people to talk about like the weird stuff, and it becomes less weird when we realize that it's just, this thing that's happening, and we have this opportunity to actually explore it with more depth and learn more about it instead of just, oh, I'm afraid, I don't want to do that, or that person's crazy, and just trying to convince the collective that these things that the people are experiencing aren't real and that there's nothing worth seeing. Like, don't look at the man behind the curtain kind of energy.
I'm always saying the most prolific thinkers through time aren't appreciated in their time, and it's not till hundreds of years later that their idea actually comes into fruition. Like, how many people through history said, all right, this is how things are, and everybody viewed him as a heretic, as a completely senile, crazy person, put him to death, all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden, 200, 300, 400 years later, they're like, all right, that guy was right the whole time when we were all wrong. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind. Like, if you're thinking outside of the box, more than likely you're not going to get recognition. But 200 years down the line, somebody's going to be like, damn, this guy, he was onto something here.
Right. Right. I love that. I love
Even
that.
some of the most famous books that have been written in history didn't actually get any recognition when the person originally tried to put him out. Like, one that I always throw out, which is one of my personal favorites, The Divine Comedy. Like, he got no recognition for his book until hundreds of years after he had died. Like, he died and his book was almost lost to time. The Divine Comedy was almost lost and nobody would have even knew it existed. And then somebody found it and translated it, and all of a sudden now it's, one of the most important pieces of like literature that you learn about in school and everything. So, you never know where your stuff might end up. Just make sure that you produce it, you put it out there, because I'm sure that, it may not resonate in your time, but who knows where it might end up being later on.
Right. And even if it's just inspiring the next generation to be open-minded to what you sort of planted the seed, like maybe the technology didn't exist yet, but thank God for these people who chased, their own curiosity, their own passion, what was lighting them up, because, we wouldn't have science in its modern day form without that to help lead the way. So,
I'm always saying that with like a lot of the stuff when it comes to all this weird phenomenon. We're never going to make any big advancements individually. It's going to be one of those things that's done over time. So people need to remember, when it comes to investigating any of this phenomenon, you're not going to do it for yourself in the end of the day. You're doing it for the phenomenon and investigators as a whole. And everybody together is laying down the groundwork to build up to something bigger. There's not going to be some dude that has the definitive answer. Like, we're all doing this together to build the phenomenon and the understanding of the phenomenon and the research all together. And, we're doing it for future generations. We got to continuously keep laying the groundwork so that the next generation can keep continuing to investigate this stuff.
yeah, beautiful. I love that. So we're getting kind of close to wrapping up. Is there anything else you would like to say before we end? And could you also share how our listeners can listen to your podcast and follow you and support your work?
Well, I guess I usually do words of wisdom at the end of my show, so I guess I'll kind of throw this in as words of wisdom. Kind of what I was saying a little bit earlier. Make sure you guys always stay open, stay skeptical, but also be open-minded at the same time. And on the other side of that, if there's something that you're really passionate about, everybody has their ups and downs with it. You got to keep that in mind at the end of the day. You'll never know what the full extent of what you could possibly do is if you quit. So don't let the hard times get you down. Keep pushing through. And if it's something that you're truly passionate about, like most things, keep in mind the long run. Don't think about the short term. Think about how you're going to feel in the long run. And if you quit something that you love because of a bad comment or because of a tough time, you're going to beat yourself up about it later. So make sure that if it's something you love, you always do it. And speaking of things that you love, if you want to check out something that I've put a lot of hard work into and that I love almost like a child, you guys can check out my podcasts. Obviously, I have the three of them: Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones, Bizarre Encounters with Shayn and Oren, and Bizarre Inquiries. But like you had mentioned earlier, I put them all in one place so everybody can find it quick and easy. Open Minds Media, if you guys want to check that out and find all my podcasts, you guys can check out the link tree for Open Minds Media, which is linktr.ee/open_minds_media.
All right, and I'll add that into the description. And you have some really cool merch. Can that also be found through this same link, or is that a separate thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. That can also be found on the link. I always forget
Okay.
to advertise that I also have the Open Minds Media merch store. Not
Yeah.
just podcast designs. I do a lot of other stuff relating to cryptids and everything.
Uh-huh.
I recently made a design where it's a Bigfoot drinking a beer, sitting next to a alien smoking a joint with his third eye open, hanging out around a bonfire. I call it campfire chilling. Just kind of a cartoony, fun design. And for the more conspiratorial minded people that I have on the show, because I definitely talk about the darker facets of things, I recently made one that says break the mind control, and it's got these like marionette hands with this hypnotic spiral behind it. So if anybody wants to check it out, it's not just podcast designs. I've been trying to kind of make it its own merch company with a wide spectrum of designs that pertain to creatures, cryptids, conspiracies, all that fun stuff. So if you guys want to check that out, you guys can also find it on the link tree. And if you guys are interested in possibly winning a free shirt, I'm currently doing a giveaway that I always continuously forget to promote. I'm trying to do a 10-question survey to try to get some feedback for the show. Trying to help grow and improve the show. So all of your guys' opinions would go a long way, and I would definitely appreciate it. But once we hit 50 submissions for that survey, then I'm going to use a random number generator, and whoever the winner happens to be will get any t-shirt that they want off of the Open Minds Media merch store, any t-shirt of your guys' choice. So if you guys check it out and you guys want one, take 10 minutes or so, maybe even less, depending on how fast you fill it out. They're pretty quick pretty quick questions. And you guys could possibly even win one of those shirts for free. So definitely an option. And if anybody wants to find that, check me out on social media, and there should be links up at the top of all of my social medias where you guys can find that giveaway link, because I don't know if that one's on the link tree, but I know I have it through all my social media, so you guys can find it, and on all of my episodes too. If you guys check me out on any podcast feed, you guys will find that link in the show notes too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's been great to revisit some of this with you. And it's nice to have a friend that can meet me here with this kind of topic, because it's not as easy to always have a conversation about these things. So I really appreciate you holding this space and sharing your wisdom and your research with us today. So
Say hopefully I didn't rant too much. Once I get going on something, I feel like I get really long-winded. So yeah, hopefully I didn't rant too
no.
much. But I guess that's part of what people come to a podcast for, is they like the rants. So
Absolutely. Yeah. That was the topic I wanted to focus on. So I appreciate everything that you brought forward, and I know our audience will appreciate it too. So thank
I
you
know I
so
threw a
much.
lot of info out there for your listeners, but like I always tell a lot of people, you kind of lay down the breadcrumbs, but you guys do your own research, come to your guys' own conclusions. I just wanted to introduce you guys to the concepts, and then you guys can make up your own minds from there.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all. Check us out next time on the Astral Hour.